Yesterday, on the day of our Lord, June 4th, 2024, a handful of creators got the chance to publish their previews of the Elden Ring DLC, Shadow of the Erd Tree. I was not in the group of players that got to try this. I'm hopeful I will get to try Shadow of the Erd Tree at Summer Game Fest here in a few days. So I'm holding out hope, but it's also one of those things like, honestly, we're all going to play it. It's going to be great. We're all going to enjoy it. I don't even really need to be watching this right now. Like I've already made up my mind that this is something I want to check out because I think the evidence supports that from software. You know, they've been cooking for a while, and this, by all metrics and by every account of everybody who's tried it, seems like it's going to be well worth your time. But that being said, we are here to talk about games, to see what those who know what they're talking about say about stuff. And in this case, VaatiVidya is one of the head honchos, if not the, I would guess he's probably the definitive source for like From Software games. Like this is the guy, you know. This is the dude. So he got to go and actually try it. He put together this little video breaking down his thoughts. As always with this, if you talk about literally anything, there will be some amount of spoiled content. The what I always tell people is, like, as content creators sharing previews, we'll use the guidelines that are provided by the publisher and the devs. So if we're showing something in a preview or a review, the developers, the people that made the game, thought that it wouldn't impact your experience negatively to see it. So and then in addition to that, usually as the creator, like a lot of us will go an extra step and not show you some of the coolest things we saw just to not spoil those cool reveals that even the devs were comfortable showing. So as always, if you want to just go totally in, like if you want to go in with nothing, no information, totally blind, yeah, you should be in media blackout. I don't know why you clicked on this stream clip or anything. Like, probably shouldn't even bother. But if you're interested in seeing what the DLC has to offer, this is where you can check it out. And I would just remind everybody that the devs felt like everything that Vaati's been allowed to show would not be disruptive or would not spoil anything. So I would not stress it too much. So let's see what this is like. I've not seen any of this. I know people had a really good time and said that the DLC was quite difficult, but beyond that, I don't know much.
Miquella's cocoon, you're transported here to a small cave that opens up to a view of this, what they're calling the Skadu tree.
Then you look to your right and you see an old man baking apples. Then you're given a glider and you leave the Great Plateau.
And underneath this is an open plain. It's called the Spirit Grave Plains, and it's pretty huge. We had 3 hours with the game, but I only had time to explore a fraction of this. We were told that there were 2 legacy dungeons in this area, so finding those became my first objective. I managed to beat both of the end bosses of those legacy dungeons, and I also took down a ton of notes, so I have a lot to share with you guys today. This isn't my footage, but I did the exact same thing this character is doing now, which is to go right towards the Wicker Man in the distance.
So just to address the elephant in the room, not allowing individual capture from preview events is obviously less than ideal. You'd hope that they would allow you to capture your own footage and distribute that and share it. Some games which have launched and had major issues have prevented people from using their own footage and stuff. That's always a concern. It's mainly a concern, though, in my opinion, with reviews. Like if a review doesn't let you use your own capture footage, that's an issue. This is a preview, so I'm less worried about it. There's other things you have to factor in, like just the logistics of it. If you have 1,000 creators globally playing your game for 3 hours a piece, that's a lot of footage that they have to capture and then they have to upload and send to you through like Media Shuttle or something. It can be a lot. So if you want to be upset about it or be concerned about it, okay, but like I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't know if they're going to do reviews for this. If reviews don't allow you to use any of your own footage, that's more concerning to me, but for previews, I'm not typically that stringent. Yeah, maybe because of spoilers. That is a valid thing. It might just be, hey, you can't spoil what you don't have footage of, so we just don't trust you not to screw it up. That could very well be another reason.
The map of this area says that the entire expanse is marred by the harrowing ravages of war, and this guy is obviously one of the vestiges of that war. We know from previous trailers that these fought on Messmer's side during his attempt to purge the Land of Shadow. You know how everyone fights the Erd Tree Sentinel as soon as they first start Elden Ring? This is a lot like that. This boss takes like no damage, and I think you'd probably be better off fighting him later on. So that's what I did. I bravely ran away towards this area that you see ahead of me. This is a crossroads. It's an intersection between Castle Ensis on the right and Bellarat Tower Settlement on the left. Little did I know though, the fire giant was still aggroed onto me this entire time, so he came up behind me and killed me while I was talking to these two NPCs.
Fie, another, treading the heels of Mikela. Then, as that woman would surely say, we are in our purposes well aligned, but understand, your kind are not forgiven. The Earth Tree is my people's enemy, by Marika long betrayed, set aflame. I believe.
One thing I did see is that Video Game Chronicle, they said that their all the characters they had as templates for the preview were level 150, and they went into this and had a lot of trouble. So if you are in a spot right now, we still have time for you to grind and figure it out, but just be ready that you're probably going to need to get your character pretty high level, minimum 60 vigor. Like beyond that, you need to have your weapons fully upgraded, all that. Like, just be ready, because it seems like this is certainly considered to be an end game DLC. This is not like one of those split off halfway through the main story and try it. No, this is like, you need to be ready to go.
So you just heard talking, his dialogue cuts off there in this footage. However, while I wasn't able to record footage at the event, luckily, I can type as fast as NPCs can talk, so here's the dialogue you just heard, and here's the other dialogue he spoke that I wrote down. I transcribed all of the dialogue from all 8 NPCs that I met, but this might be considered spoilers to a lot of people, so I'll only share it later in the video. By the way, this is the entrance to Bellarat, the Tower Settlement. This was the first legacy dungeon I explored. And this is where we get to talk about the new weapons. These weapons were a highlight of the DLC. You find so many incredible ones really early on. As a reminder, there are 8 new weapon categories being introduced in the DLC, and here you can see the character has a new throwing weapon equipped and some new magic. Now the character switches weapons to equip the Dryleaf Arts, a new type of hand-to-hand combat.
Okay, that's actually really cool. Well, it's larval tears, right? That's what you need for respecking. So my question, like, I was that guy that respect a dozen times to just try out different end game weapons and stuff. So I'm wondering if they're going to give you the ability to like get a lot more larval tears to be ready to go. Like, because with all this stuff, like with so many new weapons, I would imagine a lot of them are going to require very specific stat allocations. So like if you can't respec really casually, it might be difficult to experiment with a lot of them. Like if one scales S to strength, but then another weapon you find that's really cool scales exclusively to dex at S, like I would imagine you really need to respec every time you try anything, especially if the DLC is that punishing. So maybe they'll do something like, you know how you get the like the mining bells or smithing stone bells and stuff, and then you can buy it. I don't think you ever unlock anything like that to buy larval tears. Maybe you do and I just missed it, but if they could give you the ability to do that, that would be greatly appreciated. Just so you like, it can be a lot. It can be like 10,000 runes or whatever, and then you go and respec from there. But I mean, I guess endgame 10,000 runes is not that much at all, but but you get what I'm saying. Like, I think giving you the ability to buy larval tears would be great.
By the way, again, the place we're exploring is called Bellarat Tower Settlement. From a distance, you can see this enormous tower coming out from the settlement, and clearly the settlement was built around it. So, what is this tower? Well, I found an item in this area called the Bone Bow, which imbues arrows with vengeful spirits, and it explains how the tower was once a place for ancient hexing arts. Maybe that explains why we're fighting so many spirits in this area. But I think this tower is hiding a huge secret, because in front of the tower I found a note that explains where this tower leads. Apparently it leads to the Gate of Divinity, which I think could explain the very nature of the lands between, as well as everything we saw with Marika in the previous trailer. So the tower is our objective, but to get there, first we have to defeat the divine beast that guards it.
Oh, baby. Dude, their DLC
This
monstrosities
is the
are
divine
so
beast, Dancing Lion. And it's tough. They said this was the easier boss of the two, but I disagree. I had a way harder time with this one, and it took me 3 or 4 attempts to defeat.
cool. Oh, baby.
Briefly here, we see the player use a new weapon, a thrusting shield, but there are some attacks you can't block against.
Golly.
The remembrance of the Dancing Lion tells us that when the Impaler's army assailed the tower, the ritual of the lion dance was turned towards martial ends, its divinity, its fury, its light-footed beauty. And according to a charm I found, divine beasts are messengers of the heavens, and their rage mirrors the tumult of the skies, of which storms are the pinnacle. After defeating the divine beast, I went across that bridge in the distance, and I cleared the second legacy dungeon, which is called Castle Ensis. There's no footage I can show of that, but afterwards I did actually come here and I noticed these guys fighting. This player is about to show off the new reverse hand swords, and also this new multi-shot crossbow.
Dude, seriously?
So this player is about to make their way into a nearby dungeon. Now, I only had time to clear 2 overworld dungeons, but the 2 I did find were extremely unique. You can tell that they put a lot of effort into the dungeon designs, that I found at least. And luckily, this player is going into one of the dungeons that I actually found. It's called the Ruined Lava Forge Intake. You might recognize it from a previous trailer. It's this one with the long intake pipe you can use as a bridge.
Gotta love the intake
That phantom right there says, "By grace, if I ever see another rock, I shall find it, of this I have no doubt. The altar of the forge cannot be far." The altar of the forge he's looking for is at the end of the dungeon. It's this thing from this screenshot. Interestingly, there's no boss in this dungeon that I could find, but instead I looted the anvil hammer, one of the treasures of the ruined forges. This next clip shows off the last new weapon category we haven't yet seen, the Light Greatsword class. This Light Greatsword in particular is called Milady.
Milady. Dude, it's so refreshing to see, like, once again, another DLC expansion where they could have just done, like, let's be honest, 10, 15 more weapon or more bosses, like, and everyone would have been happy. It could have been a long dungeon with progressively more difficult bosses, and then, like, I don't know, one huge encounter or set piece fight or something like that. And people would have been like, yup, still great, still amazing. But From Software just casually comes in and is like, yeah, we're going to give you like basically a whole new chunk of the map and like 100 new weapons and like not just new weapons like, oh, it's a sword, but this one's purple. Like, no, totally new archetypes and everything. It's wild. It's wild. It's so refreshing.
Okay, these new weapons
I like that.
are really something. I guess light greatswords basically then are weapons with the length of a greatsword, but with an elegant moveset that makes use of how light the weapon is.
Dude, even the grunts are doing that ground slam. Oh, get ready. Get ready. Yeah, it's like Elden Ring 1.5. Well, it's basically like, it's kind of what Phantom Liberty was, you know? I think most people would expect for a DLC, they would expect like a Hearts of Stone or a Blood and Wine, like for The Witcher 3, where it adds 10, 15, 20 hours of gameplay. And it's the same gameplay as the base game. Maybe they do some stuff like Blood and Wine did, where they kind of add a secondary kind of skill tree that's specialized and adds different mutations and stuff. So they could do something like that. But I like, there was one guy I saw, he made a very lengthy post on one of our live stream clips. I forget which video it was, but he was like, dude, I really think part of the reason the industry is so sick right now, he's like, we can blame Microsoft, we can blame Sony and all this, but honestly, I think we're the problem. So he's like blaming himself as a gamer, because he's like, for us, we've just been so spoiled that we just are expecting the spoiled treatment from absolutely everybody, which kind of defeats the purpose of the spoiling. Like, the fact that Elden Ring was so amazing was exceptional, but it was just that, exception. Like, it was an exception to the rule, which is that normally you get like a game for, in the case of Elden Ring, it was $60 at the time. You normally pay $60, you get like 30, maybe 40 hours of gameplay. Might get a little repetitive towards the end, but there's a decent story and the combat's pretty good and you have a good time. The fact that you come along and pay $60 and you get hundreds of hours of content with Elden Ring and it's only $60, like that is exceptional. But I think he was like, a lot of us have just come to expect that from everybody when that's not realistic. And I can understand the sentiment. I mean, I think it's healthy for the industry to have some games that like break the mold and are so exceptionally good that it wakes everybody up, you know? Like in the case of Baldur's Gate. You guys remember with Baldur's Gate, all the crap that went down when that game came out? And it was like, well, we shouldn't, what was the exact phrasing from that one journalist? They were like, Baldur's Gate 3 is great, but maybe don't expect this level of quality all the time. And it's like, I get what you're saying. This is exceptionally good, but also it's good to have the bar raised, you know, for us to push boundaries, for us to raise the standard, because we're paying $70 for games now. We are facing a market that's more competitive than it's ever been before. And we're running games on the most powerful hardware in human history available to consumers. So I think it's fair for us to expect bigger and badder things at the end of the day. You're right, Pablo. Yeah, Skull and Bones spoiled us with its quadruple A quality. Well, that's the thing. I mean, once we start getting more quadruple A qualities, oh baby, we're done. I love this moveset,
so
though.
Weirdly, this clip and all of the remaining footage that I have to show you is of places that I'm almost certain we couldn't access in our preview build of the game. I think these places exist if you progress past the second legacy dungeon in this starting area, but they were watching very carefully to make sure we didn't do that. I don't think we could get to these places, but regardless, this is probably a good point for us to transition into what will be the second part of this video, where from this point on, I'm going to go into extreme detail on everything I experienced, even stuff that I can't show. So that means every item description, every NPC I met, and I'm also going to talk about what's actually inside that second legacy dungeon.
And this, I think, gets more into like the spoiler full on spoiler territory. So we'll pivot to a written description of the preview from Video Games Chronicle, where they went through this stuff. It's been more than 2 years since the release of Elden Ring, a considerably long time for DLC to follow. So, although the open world action RPG is From Software's biggest game to date, with many players still combing for its secrets and besting its fiercest bosses, those of us who haven't returned since launch may be feeling just a little rusty. This is why so many people have gone back to do like a fresh playthrough before the DLC. I went back to my, like, one of my main original characters on the PlayStation 5. I was going to say PlayStation 5 and I was going to say PS5. So I was like, PS5. I went back. I have one character that's at level 80-ish. And then my other character is like level 150 something. The level 150 something character, I straight up have like run out of things to do. Every boss I've beaten, like as far as I can tell. I'll occasionally come across one I haven't fought yet, but I've pretty much cleared out everything that the game has to offer before going into New Game Plus. I'm not going to go into New Game Plus because then the DLC also scales to New Game Plus and then you're kind of screwed. So at this point, I'm just going to wait and then bring that character into the DLC. I've been having the most fun with strength builds, honestly. My level 80 character is using that like big cinder block on a sword hammer thing. That thing is goated. I don't care what anyone says. The stagger alone makes it so fun to use. And it slaps. It slaps. You upgrade that thing, it starts scaling on level S to strength. Like, oh baby, that'll rock your world. Yeah, it's been 2 years. Yeah, wasn't it like May? I think it was May. I think May of 22, right? That's when it launched? No, February. That's right. Because it came out right next to Horizon Forbidden West. It was February. So February 25 or February 22. It's been over 2 years. Given that the preset builds available for our recent hands-on preview started at level 150, which is where most of us reached by the time we were able to take down the Elden Beast, I would hazard a guess that most players will want to have reached the end game before making their way to the Land of Shadow. With that, am I wrong? When I finished the game, I was level like 120. And then after finishing the Elden Beast, I went and like did some extra bosses and content and stuff and cleaned up the rest of the map, and then I reached level 150. But were most people level 150 at the end of the game? That to me seems quite high, but maybe I'm just misremembering it. But either way, they were targeting level 150 for the previews. The developers were. So yeah, you only need Radon and Moog Lord of Blood, yeah, to access the DLC. You're right. Because it's the arena with like the arm hanging down, and then you have to go touch the arm, I think is how they're summoning you and like spawning you in the Land of Shadow. But the fact that the developers for this preview of starter content in the DLC, they specifically had characters leveled at 150, that gives you a pretty good indication of what they were thinking. Now, you did hear him say he was able to beat some of those bosses in just like 2 or 3 attempts. So it could just be that they were like, yeah, we don't want people spending 3 hours of their 3-hour demo on one boss because they're a little underpowered. We want them to be more than powerful enough to take it on. So we'll set them up in this way and get them good. It is Vati. Yeah, you're right. Like, he's obviously very good at these games, but it would make sense to me if they were trying not to set people up to bash their heads against the wall. Like, it's a preview event. They want people to be able to get through a lot of content, not to struggle, you know, with his head getting pounded against the door. Like, it's just, I think Iron Pineapple said level 120 to 150 would be his recommendation. Yeah, I mean, most people are like, you should be end game prepared. You can access it after Moog, but you should be end game prepared. Because I think Moog, what's the recommended level for Moog? Recommended level for Moog. Oh, well, I mean, yeah, boom. Recommended level for fighting Moog is towards the end of the game, fully upgraded weapon at plus 22 to plus 25, and recommended level is usually floating between 135 and 145. I think he was like one of the last bosses I fought. So I think I didn't take him on until probably level like 140, 145 or something. So that would make sense if he's an end game. So yeah, there you go. There you go. That being said, that feels especially true when you encounter enemies that hit extremely hard, such as the case for the Black Gold Knight, an early optional boss you'll find waiting in a crypt below early on in the map. Brutal from a distance with their rapid firing crossbow as they are with their sword up close. This is what they do in the DLCs though. They take all the knobs for the NPCs and the bosses and crank them. If anything, they crank the NPC like little fodder enemies even more. I remember that from like the Ring City and then also from the Old Hunters where it's like the regular guys just out and about hard. It was like, oh, there was a lot. Then there were the grave birds perched on top of gravestones while en route to the crypt, which were responsible for the first of many deaths. At the very least, you can make use of this new enemy as a summonable spirit ash. If you liked being able to pick on big lumbering trolls early on in the base game, I'd advise you keep your distance from a giant with a huge forge for a body, because even if it doesn't stomp you, you'll no doubt be engulfed by the flaming AoE it produces. A good time is to remind you that jumping is a viable tactic. Indeed, indeed. Which isn't to say that everything's out to get you from the off. In this land of muted colors with the dark air tree standing oppressively in the distance, there are also many docile shadows wandering the fields. A forlorn sight that also makes for more low-stakes punching bags to practice on. Ooh, look at that shield. Ooh, I love it. Dude, the weapon variety is crazy. With the 3 builds to start from, the strength-based warrior, dex-based knight, and faith and intelligence-based sorcerer, each is equipped with completely new armor and weapons. We were told there are more than 100 new weapons in the expansion. I said earlier, yeah, they'll add like 100 new weapons. I said that sarcastically, thinking that's such an insane number. That proves my point that they just go above and beyond, right? Well, it's literally true, apparently. It's not an exaggeration with them. Okay, well, there you go. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Discussing with some other folks at the event, many favored the sorcerer build for the powerful ranged spells, but also because they can equip new martial arts style, essentially transforming the game into dark fantasy Sifu. But old habits die hard, as we went with the dex-focused knight, whose starting weapons shined with elegance and agility. Milady is described as a light greatsword. Oh, this is the thing we just heard Vati describe. Booyah! Do-do-do-do-do-do.
Sebastian Fuentes donated $10. Hi, Papa Luke, newcomer here.
Hello, my
Just
child.
wanted to say I absolutely love your YouTube videos. Keep killing it, brother.
Holla, will do, my friend. Appreciate you. Thank you kindly. And thank you for watching. Very generous tip. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Let's see. Yeah, all sorts of new items, new ashes and stuff. Assistance from new characters on a pilgrimage to this new land to find Michaela. Melania. There's plenty to catch you out. A Bastille appointed too long brace on a cross. I mean, it's just wild. Judging by the name alone, Relena, the twin Moon Knight, is almost certainly related to Renala and the Carrion royal family, though it makes a formidable melee-based opponent just from her twin blades. In some ways, being a humanoid boss meant I found her a little easier to engage with just by slowly circling her, waiting for an opening, but that all went down the drain by the time she starts bringing elemental spells into the fight, imbuing each blade with fire and magic. The latter has such a ridiculous range with enough damage to one-shot that we simply had no answer. Let's just say running away wasn't one. You're not left completely to your own devices, as it's possible to summon a few of Michaela's followers into the fight. More often than not, however, they felt more of a hindrance as it became trickier to read the action with multiple figures in a scrum, while you'll have to contend with the scaling benefits the boss receives when more allies are involved. I mean, I'm really interested to see how it scales with some of the stuff. Like, if you have a melee-based character, the, like, whatever clone, mimic, that's it. The mimic summon is, like, straight up goated. because it just duplicates your damage basically. It just, and you have double stun, double poise damage. Like it can just slap and stun lock bosses. Very, very powerful. I'm wondering if they're going to try to nerf some of that stuff in the DLC and make it not as good in the DLC, or if they're going to offer improved summons, or if they're just going to kind of encourage you not to use them. Because if, like, a lot of purists were like, you shouldn't use any summons at all. Summons are easy mode or whatever. And it's like, okay, I don't know about that, because like there's entire boss fights where they're built around using summons. That's like the whole thing with Radon. And so I don't know if I would go that far as to say it's like bad to use, but if they're really trying to crank difficulty, then I could see them doing this. Purish Murmish. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's always some amount of gatekeeping with it. I just don't, I find it such a turnoff and so cringe to be like, yeah, you're playing this game series I love. Well, you're playing it wrong. Screw you. Like, what are we doing? Mimic was already nerfed. Like it didn't, and my understanding is the nerf that they did back at this point, like a year and a half ago, was that they kind of stunted the scaling of its like HP, defense, and damage and stuff. So it used to be like at fully leveled up, it used to be just a straight clone of you, but then after they nerfed it, it was a good bit weaker than you, but it's still damn powerful, dude. It's still damn powerful. If it's in the game, use it. Who cares? Have fun. Oh yeah, you mean you actually used fire flowers in Super Mario? Pff, noob. Yeah, it's like playing Mario Kart and being like, oh, you used those mushrooms for speed boosts? Pff, I guess if you need it. It's like, well, I mean, it's in the game, so there's that. That to me is an important element of this, but okay. And it's a cool way. Like, From Software has experimented with co-op for ages and ages, and it was always a really cool thing. But if you didn't have anybody to play with, you just never got to experience that sort of like collaborative combat. And I think for a lot of bosses, they built them in a way where it can be important to have something pull aggro for you while you set up maybe backstabs or whatever else. So I think that summons were their way of sort of fixing that and offering a solution where you can basically play co-op without having to actually be playing online co-op. So it's kind of a cool way of solving it. But inevitably you got people that threw fits about it. EA said it perfectly. It's in the game. You're right. You are right. They did in fact say that. They sure did. He took my thing.